Have you ever heard the phrase, the war to end all wars? Well, what if that war actually did the exact opposite? Today, we're diving into the first half of the 20th century. It was this insane period, just one crisis after another, that basically tore the world apart and then put it back together in a completely different way.
Okay, so to make sense of all this chaos, we're going to break it down. We'll look at 5 key stages, the sort of domino effect. And we'll start with the weird contradictions that were bubbling under the surface right from the beginning. You know, the historian Eric Hobsbawm really hit the nail on the head. He called it the age of extremes. And that's just perfect, right? It was a time of amazing, mind-blowing progress and, at the same time, just unimaginable violence. I mean, just think about it for a second. On one hand, people were living longer, more people could read than ever before. You've got movies, this incredible new art form. But, just under all that shiny progress, something really dark was growing. These new ideas, all based on hate and power. So you've basically got the world splitting into 2 teams with completely different rulebooks. You had Team West, led by the USA, all about capitalism and individual freedom. And then you had the new kid on the block, the USSR, trying this radical experiment with socialism, promising equality, but with the government controlling everything. And these two, they weren't just going to coexist peacefully. They were set up for a major showdown. And the first spark that lit that fuse, it was the First World War, the so-called Great War. And here's the thing, it didn't solve a single problem. All it did was leave this poison of bitterness and anger that was just going to fester for years. So the first ingredient in this toxic cocktail was something called aggressive nationalism. And this isn't just, I love my country patriotism. No, this was different. This was my country is the best and all other countries are the enemy. It turned national pride into a weapon. And with that kind of thinking, what happens next? Everyone starts making secret deals. You get this tangled web of alliances. So for about 30 years, Europe is just splitting itself down the middle, creating 2 huge armed camps staring each other down. The whole continent was basically a powder keg, just waiting for a single spark. So what do you do when you're terrified of your neighbors? You build bigger guns. And that's exactly what happened. A massive arms race. Look at these numbers. Military spending more than tripled. They weren't just getting ready for a potential war, they were building the machinery for it on an industrial scale. Okay, so the war ends. Phew, right? Wrong. The peace treaty, the famous Treaty of Versailles, was a disaster. It wasn't about healing or moving on. It was all about punishing Germany. It crushed them with debt, took their land, and just humiliated them. And all that did was create this deep, simmering anger, just waiting for someone to come along and use it. And that anger, that was like dry tinder. And the match that was about to light it? A worldwide economic meltdown. It was the absolute perfect storm for some really extreme, really dangerous leaders to grab power. Meanwhile, while all this is happening, Russia just completely implodes. In 1917, you get not one, but 2 revolutions. The Tsar is out, and in comes Lenin and his Bolsheviks. They pull Russia out of the war and create the first ever socialist country. And let me tell you, this sent absolute shockwaves of panic across the rest of the world. Then, 1929, Wall Street crashes. The Great Depression goes global, and it hits Germany, already on its knees, like a tidal wave. By 1932, 6 million people were unemployed. We're talking about a whole generation of people with no work, no money, and absolutely no hope. And this sign, it just says it all, doesn't it? Willing to do any work. It's heartbreaking. It shows you the sheer desperation. And you have to understand, when people are that desperate, they're not looking for a reasonable, moderate solution. They'll listen to anyone who comes along with a bold promise, no matter how crazy it sounds. And guess who stepped right into that vacuum of despair? A brand new, incredibly violent ideology called fascism. It had a very simple, very brutal message. We'll make our nation great again, and we'll do it with force. It basically said war is good, and the strong are supposed to crush the weak. It's as simple and as terrifying as that. Okay, this is maybe the most important takeaway from this whole thing. World War II, it wasn't a new war. Not really. It was basically part 2. It was the tragic and you could almost say inevitable conclusion to the story that started back in 1914. And just look at how fast it all happened. It's honestly shocking. Hitler took all that German anger about the treaty, all that desperation from the Depression, and he weaponized it. In 1928, his Nazi party was a joke, less than 3% of the vote. 4 years later, they're the biggest party in the country. A year after that, German democracy is gone, and he's the dictator. And his whole ideology was built on pure, unadulterated hate. He preached about a master race, he blamed all of Germany's problems on Jews and other minorities, and he used secret police and terror to crush anyone who disagreed. And it all led to one thing: a state-organized industrial system of mass murder. The human cost, it's just staggering. 6 million. Just try to wrap your head around that number for a second. The Holocaust was the horrifying centerpiece of it all, the calculated, systematic murder of 6 million Jewish people. So in 1945, the war is finally over, and the world is just shattered, continents in ruins. But out of all that destruction came this one powerful, shared idea: never again. Whatever it takes, we can't let this happen ever again. And if you thought the first war was bad, the second one was on another level entirely. We're talking about 25 million people dead, more than double the first war. It's a number that's so huge, it's almost meaningless. It's just catastrophic. This war was a total game changer for who was in charge of the world. The old empires, Britain and France, they were basically broken, and two new heavyweights stepped into the ring: the USA and the USSR. Two superpowers with completely opposite ideas about how the world should work. But something else came out of all those ashes, something hopeful: the United Nations. It was this big, bold idea, a bet that from now on, countries could solve their problems by talking instead of fighting. So that really leaves us with one big question, doesn't it? We went through this age of extremes, and we built things like the UN to stop it from happening again. But look around today. Have we actually learned our lesson? Or is history starting to look a little too familiar?